Today's guest is no stranger to the microphone. In fact, you might just recognize her voice if you've attended Cattlemen's Congress or an event put on by NRHA, NRBC, or 100X. Kirby Palmer, an auctioneer's daughter from right outside Buffalo, New York, is a professional equine and livestock show announcer. But she's also a wife, mom of 2 young boys, and livestock producer. In an industry where women behind the microphone are still relatively uncommon, Kirby has carved out a respected career while managing family life, a multi-species livestock operation, and a role with the Erie County Ag Society. Today, we're talking about the evolution of blessings and challenges in unique careers, the importance of picking a partner you can do life with, the joys and unexpected of raising kids in the livestock industry, and why the strongest communities are those made up of people that want to help each other succeed. Join me in welcoming a dear friend and someone I deeply admire, Mrs. Kirby Palmer. Kirby, thank you so much for joining us today. Before the episode, to our listeners, I told Kirby I was a little bit nervous because I know she's one of the busiest people I've ever met. And luckily, she said we caught her at a good time. So we're super lucky to have you on. And without further ado, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up?
Yes, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this, Riki, so I appreciate you having me on. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. That's one of my favorite things to tell people because they get a crazy look on their face when I tell them I'm from Buffalo, New York. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York, just outside of the actual city, so on some very small ag land that you wouldn't even think is a farm down in Oklahoma and Texas. But grew up on a crop farm. My mom's family raised Angus cattle and Hereford cattle. My dad's family was very involved in the reining horse industry and still is. So kind of really a diversified farm. I grew up showing reining horses, cattle, and sheep. So involved with all of the livestock there on the farm. Grew up showing 4-H. And my mom's family also has, like I mentioned earlier, a crop farm, and we have a pretty large wholesale and retail business. So I'm still involved with that to this current day.
Okay, so definitely sounds like you had some exposure to all of the facets of the agriculture industry. So quite the upbringing, and like you mentioned, I think a lot of us Southerners do kind of get that surprised look on our face when you say that you grew up in agriculture, especially in New York. So Buffalo layered on top of that is just kind of like, what? Are you serious? So can you maybe tell us a little bit about the livestock and ag scene in New York and why people have misconceptions about agriculture in New York?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, other than the big glooming piece that when you say New York, people think New York City, which is totally understandable, but we're like 6 or 7 hours from New York City. So from where my family farm is, I could be in Canada in 15 minutes. I could be in Columbus, Ohio faster than I could be in New York City. So we really are on that real, like the most western part of the state. That's what we call where I grew up is Western New York. So ag is booming, definitely in Western New York as well as Central New York. But dairy is a huge commodity here in the state. Apples, potatoes, corn, a lot of those different types of crops. In maple, I know that everyone thinks Aunt Jemima created maple, but she didn't. New York is a huge maple state. So we have some really great ag commodities here in the state that I think people just don't think of when you say New York because they think of New York City. So from a fair side of things, I know we'll talk about this later, but do some really great stuff at a fair that I work at and really try to hit home to the non-ag community what New York's all about and some of the great products that we grow here in the state.
That's awesome. It's always super interesting to learn about the different commodities and the really big parts of agriculture in each state. And it's so cool how each state is super unique, and really just diving into that when you do further your education, say through FFA classes in high school, or if you do go on to study anything ag related in college. So on that note, Kirby, would you mind maybe just telling us, once you finished up your youth activities, I guess you could say, where did you go on to study?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually FFA is quite prevalent in the schools around here, but they did not have an FFA chapter at the high school I went to. So, as I mentioned earlier, I was pretty active in 4-H, probably due to the fact that my school didn't have FFA. I certainly wish they did because it's a great program and certainly growing here in New York State. But after high school, I went on to Morrisville State College. It's a state school here in New York, and I got a 4-year degree in agriculture business development. Kind of one of those pieces of life where I don't regret it, but I certainly kind of wish that I had went farther away from home and maybe did some of the bigger things in the Midwest that maybe, could have been there for me. But I stayed closer to home, which is fine. I'm an only child, so my family's farm market business is, kind of one of those things that glooms in the back of my mind that I know that's gonna be mine one day, and I'm gonna need to take it over or do whatever I'm gonna do with it. So staying close to home was important to me from that aspect.
I'm glad you hit on that point. I'm not sure that we've covered it on the podcast yet, but just from the perspective of like you said, having family businesses to go back to, or maybe just need that extra help and support from the kids of the family. So staying close to home, there's definitely no shame in that. And likewise, just really depends on your situation and the support that you have, whether it makes more sense for you to go further away from home, way across the country, or, an hour down the road. So thank you for hitting on that point. I do want to kind of transition into just who you are. It's how we got to know each other. For a little context to our listeners, Kirby and I met, I guess it would have been 2 years ago now at Cattlemen's Congress. I remember I was an intern and I had actually never been to Congress before, so it was all super new to me. And I remember they gave out assignments that morning and they said, Riki, you're going to be on the stage doing results. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm ready to take on whatever. And that's when I met Kirby. And at first I was so intimidated, one, because she's a rock star, but two, she just doesn't mess around. But I think that we could probably both agree the more we got to know each other, we see eye to eye on quite a few things. So we definitely had a good time together, and it was super fun learning from her and getting to sit next to her and just hear some of the experiences that she had. And so now that I've given way more than my 2 cents on how we first met, Kirby, I guess, could you just tell us how you first got behind the microphone and when you realized that announcing could become a career?
Riki, the short answer, I have no idea. I've been asked this before, and I try to think back, when the first time I truly grabbed the microphone was. But the fairgrounds I work at, we host a bunch of livestock shows, and my boss used to be the one that announced those events, and she did a great job at it. And, your roles and stuff develop. Sitting behind the microphone in some way, shape, or form is not the role that she needed to be in. So they had me start announcing some of those jackpot shows, and I did it, I think, fine at that time. I've always been a decent public speaker, so I think that was a benefit to me to sit behind the microphone. And then we had a horse event at that fairgrounds, kind of like a trade show horse event, and we were doing clinics. And as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the reining horse industry, and there was a trainer by the name of Sean Flairda, for any of those listening that know anything about the reining world. He's certainly a big name in the world of reining, and he was doing a clinic, and I was on the microphone. I've known him my whole life, and he kind of turned around and he's like, I didn't know you could talk like that. And I said, well, I kind of turn it on when the microphone comes on. My voice has a tendency to fluctuate, whether it be just having a casual conversation or on the microphone. And he goes, you need to announce horse shows. You're pretty good at this. So long story short, on that end, he got me a job doing a pretty decent sized show in Ohio. And I did that for a number of years. And that horse show led me into some other big horse shows, and I've had the opportunity to do some big events for the NRHA in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and the NRBC I've done for a few years. I worked for 100X, so I've had some great exposure, and I've been able to do a lot of things in the reining world. But on the livestock side of things, like I mentioned, I kind of just started at the county fair and kind of developed over time. I think we're probably going to touch on some, life things later in our chat, Riki, but there's a woman that needs no introduction. Her name's Erin Dorsey, and I have to attribute a lot to what I have currently in the livestock world to Erin. When they decided to start the Cattlemen's Congress, it was started, as most of you know or maybe don't know, because of COVID, trying to give cattlemen an opportunity to showcase their cattle on the big stage, and some of those shows that were postponed or canceled for that year. Certainly, a lot of those guys depend on those events to sell their cattle. So Cattlemen's Congress was started, and they kind of got down to the nitty gritty of, we don't have an announcer. Like, we've done all these things and done them so quickly, and we don't have an announcer. And they had brought Erin into that team to, just with her, dedication to the industry and her connections. And Erin's like, well, I have someone, she can do it. Like, she'll be great. And she told Gerald Callahan that she had a female from Buffalo, New York, that could handle the task. And she said he wasn't really about it, but they didn't really have an option because, I want to say it was like the end of November when they called me. So yeah, long story short, they got me there, and the rest is history, and we can chat more about that piece later. But yeah, it's just been, honestly, through connections I've made in the industry, and I guess evolving my craft. I grew up around microphones, if you will. My dad's an auctioneer by trade. We had horse sales at our place for years. He, for a full-time job, sold cars as a living. So being on a microphone, near a microphone, listening to someone perfect their craft on the microphone has always been something I've been around. So it just has kind of evolved and kind of become part of my identity.
That is an awesome story. And I know you said that you're not quite sure how, where it started, but it sounds like it's been a wonderful journey, and really appreciate that you highlighted your boss at the fairgrounds and Erin Dorsey. She's quite the woman. I love her to death too. So it's great to be able to look back on this amazing journey that you've had, Kirby, and still see those people that have helped you along the way. And I think that's such an important perspective for our listeners to take, is that, you would never be the announcer that you are today without their help. And the fact that you recognize that and are able to highlight them is just very admirable, because I think that a lot of people wouldn't be doing the same thing if they were in your position. So kudos to you for sure on that one. When you were talking about Congress and how they brought you onto the team, it reminded me of a quote that Dr. Hogue said during one of, I think maybe his Grand Drive speech or something like that, or just one of the times he was on the microphone when we were both sitting on the stage this past year. I believe he said, "Great music, great environment, great cattle. That's what describes the Cattlemen's Congress." And if I'm not mistaken, it was after a stint of some rock songs that you had played. And so I think that there are a lot of aspects of these announcing gigs that you are responsible for that people maybe overlook, don't even realize someone is putting time and effort into doing. So could you tell us a little bit about some of those responsibilities or what people don't see about being a professional announcer?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of one of the topics that I'd say I'm most passionate about, because it's not in a like toot my own horn fashion. I'm not the only announcer in the world. There's plenty of capable, very, very talented folks, men and women, that can do it. But I've learned the importance of having an announcer that keeps the flow of the show going. From an exhibitor standpoint, now that I sit where I sit as far as my craft, if you will, I guess, when I go to a show, the first thing I like listen for is the announcer, not the quality of their voice, not what they say, but just if they're able to keep the flow of the show going. I'm sure I didn't have to say it to you, Riki, but I know I say it to interns a lot that I work with. If you don't bring me or the announcer the results, I might as well go home. And sometimes when I say that to them, they get real startled, like, whoa, what do you mean? if I don't have the results, I can't say them on the microphone. If there's premiums attached to them, we can't pay those folks properly. If you bring the results incorrectly, those folks don't get paid properly. So there's so much that goes in to the announcer and to that crew that sits on the stage or sits at the table at the county fair, no matter what size show you're at. The importance of the announcer is key to making your show ring run smoothly. And I take pride in that. I think because I've started, at the county fair level and worked through the ranks of, being the ribbon girl and taking the results and working the back gate and moving cattle in the ring. The girls at the fair that I work for always joke when we have interns that come work for us that if Kirby has to come off of her perch, like, you're in trouble. I sit up on an auction block, actually, that's what I announce off of at our fair. And if there's one pet peeve of mine, it is when cattle stop moving. And most of the folks, and I think you probably know that from working with me at Cattlemen's, but there is nothing that sends me to attend more than if cattle are in the ring and there's interns or staff in the ring and the cattle aren't moving and the interns aren't paying attention. So that makes me sound like an ogre, and I don't mean to sound that way, but I take pride in making sure that the arena I'm working, like I said, whether it's Cattlemen's Congress or a county fair in California, that we're making sure that the livestock are moving, the exhibitors are having the experience they need, the results are being announced properly. If I'm working a county fair or some small show, if I'm helping with check-in and then I'm going to be on the microphone later, I always ask kids, how do you say your name? Or is there a different way to say that than the way it's spelled? Like, if we're talking from the Brahmin world, I know you're familiar with them, but Becca Richard, she's now Humphrey, but she was my wedding photographer. If I would have looked at that just regularly, I would have said Richard, but I know it's not Richard. So there's so many things, and as you can tell, I'm wildly passionate about it, but it just excites me to be able to put on a stage for exhibitors that makes them feel welcome, makes them feel important, and make sure that the show, is really in the most professional setting it can be.
I am smiling from ear to ear, just having picked up on a lot of those things that you're responsible for. In layman's terms, I look at your job and all the things that from the backside I was able to see that you take care of. You are the vibe setter. You're playing the music. You're making sure that people are getting announced. You're keeping the rings moving. You're keeping the crowd engaged. There are so many little things that all feed into your job, and people overlook that quite often. And I think it might be fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes you do have a thankless job. Maybe it's because of your location and you being off on the stage or on the auction block away from everyone, but what you do is so important and is such an integral part of shows of any size. So on the flip side of that, Kirby, I'm curious, what are some of maybe the biggest challenges that you faced shaping this path in announcing?
The short answer to that is the challenges I have faced and will continue to face are ever changing. I would say when I was younger, it was more so just perfecting my craft, perfecting the pieces that I just talked about and the things that you and I know have discussed, perfecting those and really taking the responsibilities that aren't necessarily spelled out to the job of the announcer and almost forcing those to be my responsibility because I've been on the management side of an event and not just the announcer. I know those pieces that show management struggle with or need assistance with. So especially at Cattlemen's Congress, I have tried to take some of those pieces and honestly forcibly made them my own because I know it takes, some responsibility off the staff, and that staff we'll talk about later, but I can't say enough about them and how much they've done for my career, but also they're so accommodating but also understanding of it was a struggle at first. Everyone's got to learn different personalities, but we now know each of our strengths and what we bring to the table, and I'm more than happy to serve as more than just the person that sits behind the microphone. So long short answer is just evolving my craft, evolving what I do as the announcer at different events. But then I guess challenges, and I think we're going to talk about this later, but challenges as I've aged, if you will, I guess would more so be about the little tykes at home and how what that looks like, and the traveling and the trying to be present for my family, for myself, not losing who I am, but realizing that my role here on earth is ever evolving. So that's been a beautiful struggle, but it's been a challenge for sure.
That was a perfect transition into our next topic. And I appreciate you being a little vulnerable there and sharing some struggles that you've had throughout your career. But also at the same time, I really appreciate it because I think it can be super encouraging for people that might be experiencing those same challenges and seeing that, if other people can do it and I work hard enough, I persevere, I can overcome these challenges that will ultimately lead to, where I'm supposed to be. So, like you talked about Kirby, your boys are Griffin and Graham, the cutest little guys, but still young. So you're at these shows and quite a few of them are a week long or longer. So you're on the road a lot, often out of state. So guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do you manage traveling for those extended periods while still being present as a wife and a mom?
The short answer is it's hard. It's really hard. And so, as you mentioned, I have two little boys at home. They're 3 and about to be 2 years old. They're only 14 months apart. So along those lines, it's like having twins. So that's a whole new world as far as I'm concerned. But since they've been babies, they have traveled with me to quite a few events, to be honest with you. Cattlemen's being the number one because I'm there so long. So, just kind of like, I guess, evolving what I do from a travel standpoint, and while they're not in school, taking them with me. So if I can, and I have the support of either my husband or other family members to get them to those places, we certainly take them. But it is a struggle. It doesn't seem quite as apparent to me, as maybe silly as this sounds, that it's quite as much of a struggle on my kids as maybe it is on my husband. My husband grew up in the livestock world. He's passionate about it just like I am. He grew up with cattle. So Cattlemen's Congress is a great event for him to come to and be at with me. They've actually employed him the last few years. So we travel to Cattlemen's as a family. JD Roseman, who has been very instrumental in my career as well. His sister-in-laws watch my kids while we're there. But we are like a traveling circus. I mean, we have to take all the things and do all the things. And JD is so kindly opened, JD and Bree have opened their home up to me and my family. That's been wonderful. So honestly, Cattlemen's is one of the easiest because we all go. Other than the fact that we're calving at home, we all go and it just works. The shorter shows, 4 or 5 days, those ones are actually harder because my husband owns his own electrical business, and it's growing and booming. So he's busy all the time, which is a wonderful thing. So I try really hard to have, babysitters lined up and folks to watch my kids. And I would say I shouldn't even say 99, 100% of those people are either our family or our close friends. And I'm telling you, Riki, and I know I've told you this before, but all the other people that are listening, surround yourself with a village because you are going to need them, and it is okay to lean on them. I would do the same thing for any one of my family members or my friends that help with my kiddos, and it's honestly makes me emotional just thinking about it because I could not do it without my mother-in-law, my parents. Absolutely, though, my mother-in-law, she is a saint. She watches my kids more than she probably should, but it's wonderful to have those folks around me and the support system that I do. So it's ever changing. The challenges I face are evolving over time. They're beautiful challenges, but they're hard. They're really hard.
Oh man, it definitely sounds, Kirby. You kind of summarized it perfectly, to surround yourself with a village. But it sounds like at the end of the day, it all comes down to having that community and that support. Whether, like you said, it's from family or friends that feel like family, they can all have a very huge impact. And I think oftentimes people offer to help, and I know I have been guilty of it 100 million times, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to bother them. I don't want to, you know, take up their time or energy or whatever. But if someone is offering to help you, they genuinely are offering, they are willing to do it. So don't be afraid to reach out to them. Because, I mean, on the flip side of that, I know I've offered to help people and they never reached back out. And I'm like, oh, I really think that I would have loved to, watch their kids or come and help with whatever it may be at the house. And so don't be afraid to reach out. And at the same time, if you have the time and the resources, don't be afraid to offer people help if you think that they might need it, or they might, want to grow their village. So I have been fortunate to meet your adorable little boys. I say little, they are growing so much. I've loved keeping up with you guys on Facebook, and you said it's basically like raising twins, and holy cow, they look so much alike. So what lessons have they taught you about life or motherhood?
A lot. I don't know that I said it earlier, but I'm 34 years old, and a lot of my friends and I always chat about the struggles of having kids and getting married, and I don't care what age you are, they're all struggles. They're wonderful struggles, but they're struggles. And to go back to kind of the challenges I faced, I guess, to tie it all together, I had a lot of friends that had kids when they were young. Like, I know I'm not old, but young, like 22, 23. And I think about those friends of mine, and I almost envy them in a way, because they weren't totally set in their professional careers yet. So they've developed their lives, their day to day with children at a young age before they've maybe really cracked into their professional career. That didn't go the same way for me, and I'm totally okay that it didn't, because I have a beautiful family and an awesome husband and a great support system. I had 10 years of professional development that I felt like I was really, you know, hitting my stride. And then I got married, and then I had Griffin, and then shortly after I had Graham. And I was just talking to my boss the other day at the fairgrounds, and I made the comment of, I at 34 years old, I'm realizing I can't do it all. And she essentially like clapped and said, I'm glad you realize that now. I said, no, don't get me wrong, I'm still trying to do it all, but I can't. So I guess from what my boys have taught me, and maturity as a mother, is to be present for all the things, but not let life stop. They obviously don't know they've taught me that, but me and my husband, and probably more so me, because I think if if I allowed my husband to, he would be totally fine. He's a little bit more of a regimented person than I am. He'd be totally fine with staying home on the weekends, and having the strict bedtimes, and he goes with the flow with what I want to do, and I love him for it. But I've just tried very hard to incorporate my kids into the life that I once lived. Has it changed? Absolutely. But my kids, they are go with the flow kids. They'll hang out with anybody. They love people, they love livestock, they love sports, and they're so little. So it's actually energizing to watch them love a life that my husband and I love at such a young age. And I think it's teaching me to not stop. No matter what life throws at you, whether it's kids, whether it's marriage, whether it's career changes, just keep going. So I guess long and short is that's really what they've taught me. And just also my gosh, you've said it a couple times, but they are so cute. They just make life just so fun and so entertaining, and it's all really good stuff.
I think that was a really nice perspective that a lot of people don't think about, because it's definitely becoming more common, I would say, at least among my friends and such, to wait a little bit longer to get married. So I would say it's probably about 50-50. I mean, one of my best friends is getting married in January. So we just graduated college. So there's definitely still some that are getting married very young and going to have kids young. But like you said, you just kind of have to, whatever life throws at you, you can't stop. Don't let it stop you. Continue building your life and integrating those things that those blessings, like you said, of starting a business and having kids and all of that. So I really appreciate that. But on the marriage piece, I've been fortunate to meet Garrett, and he is amazing. And I know we've talked about your dating advice and things like that. And so I'm curious, on the flip side of that, what is maybe some advice that you were given that you've really seen come to fruition, or it's worked in your relationship and now marriage with your husband?
That's a loaded question, but I've got an answer for you. But I do have to tell you quick, along the lines of Garrett, last night we were sitting on the back porch and the kids were playing, and I was listening to one of your podcast episodes with Amy Cowan, and just to get a feel for, how the flow would go, and to try to prep for our conversation. And your voice came on and you said your name, and and Garrett turns and looks at me and goes, like, Riki? I said, what? He goes, yeah, like Riki, like our Riki. I'm like, what are you? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, like Riki from Cattlemen's. I said, yeah. He goes, oh, that'll be fun. So it's just Garrett is a different human than I am. He loves his people hard, but he's not the chatterbox that I am. He's not the socialite that I am, but he knows good people. So I thought it was sweet that he called you our Riki.
Oh, I appreciate that. I would definitely take it.
Yeah, so I guess back to your question about relationships, and sometimes sitting up on that stage specifically at Cattlemen's turns into a life lesson, which I'm all about. If I can give any advice to, younger me, I certainly would. But, Garrett and I, our relationship has gone really fast. We both were in past relationships that just, didn't work out, and that's okay. That's literally life. That's how this works. We both knew what we wanted in a partner and what we didn't want in a partner. So I think that's really important to, maybe someone your age, Riki, or even younger, is to learn from what you had, and recognize why you got out of that situation and why you don't want to have that type of relationship in the future. I know it always seems like the world is ending, and all the things are crumbling and you're never going to meet someone, but I promise, anyone listening, you will. Be vulnerable, be open, let life come to you, take all the opportunities, do all the things. But from a relationship standpoint, I think the reason that Garrett and we just work so well is because we're honest with each other. We're honest with each other, we're real with each other, and we do life together. There's no issue with having your own thing and having friends like that. That's all a part of it. But my mom always told me at a really young age, and I kind of thought she was crazy when she said it, but I understand it now. She always told me you should want to be with your significant other more than have a girls' night. And I'm like, well, you got to have friends. What are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, but you'll get it someday. And I do. I love my friends, and I have a big community of friends. But at the end of the day, Garrett is who I want to be with. He's who I want to, sit in the backyard and watch our kids play with. He's who I want to go to a jackpot show with our kids with, So it's just all about finding your person and literally doing life with them. You have to support one another, and that was maybe something that I didn't have in past relationships, and it's something that I have had to learn to A, accept, and B, which is probably the biggest struggle for me, is to give back. I feel like I'm a pretty easy person to be around. I feel like I love my people hard, but I think that something I've had to learn and teach myself is just because I think in my head that I'm supporting my husband or that I'm telling him that I love him or that I appreciate him, I'm not. I think I am, and I'm not showing him as much as maybe I should. So I guess just long and short is, support each other, be there for each other, tell each other, you love each other or you're proud of them or they're proud, either way, those little things, when they come from the person that you love, cherish, and honestly admire the most, it means more than anything else. So just do life together, be there for each other and support each other's hobbies if maybe they're different from one another. But as long as you can operate life together, I truly think that's recipe for success.
That sounds like a great recipe. And I know you've shared that with me before, and I definitely go back and replay those conversations when I'm experiencing those, those not so fun parts of dating. But like you said, holding on to that promise of like God definitely has somebody in store for all of us. And if he doesn't, then he himself is in store for us. So no matter what, at the end of the day, there is love for us, and you can find that in your friends and or in your spouse. But I really, really love the point that you make about just being able to do life together and, not putting on this performance of like who you think your boyfriend wants to be with. Like if they don't want to be with you, I always say, joke with my friends, like, this is the real raw Riki. Like I ain't, I'm not hiding anything. If somebody doesn't want to be with their real raw you, then they're not the person for you, because there is somebody out there, like you said, that wants to just be with you. Like you don't have to be doing all these extravagant things and going on trips and whatever. Just spending time together, doing what you enjoy doing, whether that's clipping sheep or pigs, working cows at, 7 in the morning, whatever it is, just being together and doing life together. Being able to do that will always work out over other things. So kind of also in that space, Kirby, you guys own and operate Palmer Land and Livestock. So can you maybe tell us how that came about?
So the name in and of itself is not very old. I myself and my parents used to always operate under Katie Livestock, so my maiden name is with a D. So that was, at a young age, that was our farm name. Our horses were under Digert Equine Services. They still are. We raise and sell quarter horses for the sport of reining. So that has been a family business. My dad and my uncle did that together as young kids, and it's developed over time, and that's a really unique part of, I guess, who I am and where I come from. But on the Katie Livestock side of things, I always call it like my 4-H project that went wrong, I guess. And it didn't go wrong. It went well. It went great. But my dad grew up with Dorset sheep, and just at a young age, I always loved sheep. I loved the market lamb thing. I just thought it was intriguing, and I loved learning about sheep and raising them and getting that project to the end, to the county fair. And I raised, the first year I had a market lamb that we kept him. I don't know actually why I did this, because we have a farm at home, but I kept him at my uncle's farm with my cousins, and that was kind of my first step into that 4-H project. I had some steers the years prior, but that was my first year for sheep. And then I told my dad, I said, I want to do this at home so that I can, exercise them and do all the things daily right at home. And so we did that, and one market lamb led to buying a group of ewes, and from that it's just kind of developed, and we've got about 50 ewes now, I guess a small flock if you will, and we raise club lambs for kids on the East Coast, and we sell them online annually in the spring, or late winter, I guess, if you will, now, because everything just keeps getting older, and it's just been kind of an ever-changing little niche business. My dad loves the sheep. He loves lambing. He'd probably laugh if he heard that, but I know he does. I know he loves it, especially because we're at Congress when we're doing a lot of the lambing. So that's sometimes a struggle because, as I mentioned earlier, being from Buffalo, I don't know if anyone knows this, but kind of get a lot of snow here. So lambing in the December month is not ideal, but it is what it is. So we changed that name to Palmer Land and Livestock. I guess it was maybe 2 years ago now, just because my last name is now Palmer, and my husband is quite intricate into the sheep business. He absolutely is going to listen to this podcast later and probably tell me he hates sheep because he tries to pretend like he does, but I know he likes it. He's competitive, so he likes all things livestock. That's all of our natures, right? Even if you're a Brahmin girl, you still like livestock. So yeah, so that's kind of been, I guess, the developing name. My husband and I have a small herd of Simmental cattle, and we're growing that way more rapidly than I thought we would be, but it's awesome. And I grew up showing cattle, so I'm all about it. But that's certainly my husband's passion project. So that's been really fun to slowly grow that and get some cattle on our farm right at our house. The sheep still reside at my parents', which is just about 20 minutes from where me and my husband live. So we certainly kind of do it as a unit. The land piece we added to it because I guess the land piece of the name, honestly, because we grow pumpkins. My husband decided that he wanted to, when I say we, my mom's family has always grown pumpkins. We have a pretty big farm market here in Buffalo, and Garrett decided he wanted to try his hand at it and kind of liked it. So we just added, when we were doing the name, we said, well, might as well, let's throw land in there, because if this develops over time, then we don't have to change the name and can utilize that entity for multiple things. So that's kind of the evolution of the name and kind of what we're doing at home.
I love that story, and I gotta ask because I know the boys have also been into showing pigs. So, do you think they're going to be doing all three, or do you think they have a favorite?
Definitely pigs right now is their favorite. I grew up showing pigs a little bit, like that was definitely my least competitive species that I was a part of. I just did it at the county fair level and enjoyed it. And to be honest with you, my husband my husband said to me, he goes, I think like maybe we should get the boys, and he literally said this, he's like, I think we should get the boys like an Amish hog. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, just like something to like mess around with in the backyard last summer. Just something to mess around with the backyard so they can get used to being around livestock. I'm like, okay, because they never, and I think it's because their faces are so like eye level with the kids, they never really took a huge liking to the sheep at first. Like, I think it was just like the blatting and the like, just too much for them. So some friends of ours here locally raise some high quality show pigs and do great things across the country. So it's awesome that we can have null show pigs in our backyard. They had an online sale, and they were kind of like off age pigs, I guess. And they had a choice lot on a pair of gilts, and Garrett had said, he's like, why don't you like just try to buy a barrow out of there for $400 and we'll put it in the freezer when we're done, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, we'll teach the kids the whole kit and caboodle right out the gate. I'm like, okay, fine, let's do it. Well, then like my husband fell asleep, and I was, doing that online thing. If anyone's listening that buys livestock online, it's a trap. And I was bidding, and I'm like, I really like this gilt. Like, I feel like no one's really bidding. And long story short, I end up buying this gilt for far more than $400. and the kids, I grew up with the kids that raise these pigs, and one of them texted me and was like, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't really know. I just like this gilt. So long story short, we buy the gilt. We end up partnering with the kids or the guys that raised her, and she had a really successful show career. My kids were able to, more so Griffin last year, just dabble in the ring with, they called her Miss B. So they dabbled in the ring with Miss B a little bit, and some other kids that we show with showed her pretty competitively. So that was pretty cool to be a part of that. And then she laid down, had her first litter, and we kept the gilt out of there. And that one's name is TT. We've shown her quite a bit this summer, and she's done really well. So it's been super fun. And then all of a sudden Griffin decided he likes sheep, And we have a Dorset Advantage ewe that we bought from Adam Family Club Lambs, and he decided he wanted to go in the ring with her and like acted like we had taught him what to do. And it's wild. If you have kids and you are getting them involved in livestock, the stuff they pick up is absolutely wild to me. So long answer is what I just gave you, but short answer is, yeah, I think they'll show all the things. They love the cattle too, just looking at them in the pasture. So I'm sure that's coming.
Oh, that is so fun. I can't wait to see all of the pictures and videos and hopefully get to watch them in person someday. So that's going to be such a fun thing for you guys, another thing for y'all to do life together. So, well, you talked about it earlier that you also have a role at the Erie County Fairgrounds. So, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about what that role involves and why county fairs are still super important to agriculture in the local communities like in Buffalo?
Yeah, absolutely. So I technically work for the Erie County Ag Society, which puts on the Erie County Fair here in Buffalo. It is a very large county fair. I at one point we were, I think, ranked 7th, 8th based on attendance. Fair industry is kind of going away from using attendance as a measuring tool, and actually we just talked about this the other day at a meeting, but using more our impact that we have on the community, from whether it's donating food to the food bank or the businesses around us and how many livestock come through the gate and blah blah blah. So moral of that story is it's a large county fair. It's 12 days. We typically bring in about 1 million people in 12 days through those gates. So it's an awesome fair. It's the fair I grew up at. It's the fair I grew up showing at. My grandfather was on the fair board and was the veterinarian for the fair. My dad is one of the livestock auctioneers for the 4-H and FFA auction. So my mom's family is the produce purveyor for the fair. So if you have french fries or corn at the fair, they come from our family's business. So we're very much involved in the fair. But I say that because, fairs are a family event. Whether you're an employee, whether you show livestock, whether you just are attending the fair, there's such a staple in the community. And I know something that we as a staff always try to, hit home with and continue to reevaluate our importance of why we're doing what we do, what we can do to get more people in the gate, and tell, from my position standpoint, the story of agriculture and how you get food on the table and all those pieces in between. So my role at the fair is in the livestock department. I've been at the fairgrounds, started in a part-time role when I was in college. So I've actually been at the fair. I can't even say this. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but since 2010. So I've been there a long time. The fair has remained a part of me through all of my seasons of life thus far, whether it's, been part-time while I was in college to a full-time role after college, then into having kids. I went back part-time, and I'm actually still part-time and able to, I guess get my fair fix and still be on that staff and assist some of the newer, younger staff that's there full time and facilitate those livestock events. So the fair is just a part of my identity. I think it always will be. I hope it always will be. So I would beg to say, whether it's you, Riki, or anyone else listening, that, if you have a local county fair and you show livestock, that fair is going to be a part of you for as long as you're in that community, whether it's your kids showing at it once you have kids, or, volunteering or helping with a livestock show or whatever it might be. Fairs are just such a staple, and it's so unique and cool to see that is the norm across the country. I was just in California a couple weeks ago at a county fair. California is an interesting ag state. I've learned a lot about California, but I was at a fair. I guess I'll call it a fair. It's not a county fair. It's like a town fair, the Petaluma Fair, and super, super cool event. Great to be a part of it, but definitely a stitch, if you will, in the fabric of the community, so yeah, it's just, I love county fairs. It's part of who I am. And like I said, I hope I'll always have some sort of role at the fair, and certainly love giving back to the kids and the community that I grew up in. So
I think you are a perfect example of the bridge that county fairs provide for people, and from past generations to current to future, the opportunity to play a role in these and to support each other and truly come together as a community. And I think it's also been super cool to see the evolution. It's kind of always been that way since, I would say, I've been showing, but even just hearing stories from when my mom showed, is the education aspect. And you touched on it a bit, of how many that super large number of visitors that you guys have. Think about that, might be their only interaction with the agriculture or livestock industry each year, other than going to the grocery store. And so I think they play such an important role in that space, is just even more reason for us to continue growing them, these county and local fairs, so that they can kind of be that bridge for generations across the industry, and then also for people outside the industry to come in and get an inside look. So really cool having you share about your role with the Erie County Ag Society. I appreciate that, Kirby. But before we wrap up, you've shared a lot of great advice so far, but do you have any other pieces of advice or maybe encouragement for young women that are wanting to pursue, or even young men that are wanting to pursue careers that are maybe a little more unique, or maybe just general advice?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I guess my biggest piece would be, and I want to say that Amy Cowan had said something along these lines in her podcast that she did with you, but certainly don't stop. Reach for the stars, go for the gold, do all that you can, and do all that you can while you can. I'm sure I probably make it look easier than it truly is, because that's just my nature, but once you have kids, it is not nearly as easy. And like I mentioned, I have a wonderful support system, so I know not everyone is maybe as fortunate in that piece. So do all that you can while you can. Make the connections, meet people. I can't tell you how many judges we've had at the Erie County Fairgrounds that and I'm sure I annoy some of my coworkers sometimes, but I always make it a point to, try to be accommodating to folks that travel to our facility to evaluate livestock or photograph our event, just because not only I want them to feel welcome, but I want them to leave New York and say, whoa, like I had the best time, or they put us in a great place. They fed us well. And you never know when that's gonna, become full circle. I know I mentioned Erin Dorsey earlier, but it would be a whole nother podcast to tell you mine and Erin's story, but I attribute a lot of what I've done in this industry and the connections I've made because of Erin, and certainly appreciate her friendship more than she probably knows. But, Erin Dorsey, the entire team at Cattlemen's that puts on the OIE, JD, Tyler, Cass, Bray, Jacob, Emily, that whole crew, man, they are next level good livestock show coordinators, but just humans. So it's been awesome to get to know them and be a part of that story there at Cattlemen's. And my hometown staff at the fairgrounds, they know how much they mean to me and how much they've done for me. So, make the connections, meet the people, do all the things you can while you can. Be that extrovert, even if you aren't. Introduce yourself to people. I mentioned earlier, I just went to that county show in Petaluma, and Erin was my connection there, and she had Taylor Frank judging some of the stuff there, and I had Taylor come judge for me. I guess, gosh, it was about 10 years ago now, and he's a dear friend of mine. I was invited to his wedding. He was invited to mine. I know that's a little bit my personality, just to bring everyone in, but you never, ever, ever know where those connections are going to take you, what they could do for you. And then I guess just another piece that, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, Riki, but I'm not trying to blow smoke, but you certainly are a fantastic individual and did a great job as an intern, and I know you're going places in this industry. But I always try to tell, whether it be interns or myself, I guess, is make it look like somebody cared. if you're showing in a county fair or jackpot show or Cattlemen's Congress or the Wisconsin State Fair, wherever you're showing, when you walk into a show ring with your animal and there's landscaping in the corners and there's a flag in the arena and there's music playing and it looks like somebody cares that you spent your money to get there, then we as a show staff have done the right thing. So, pick the garbage up on the stage when we're done for the day. Water the flower, whatever it is. I don't need to go on the soapbox, but my mom always taught me that, and it's something that has certainly rang true in all facets of my life, is just make it look like somebody cared that you're there.
Boom, mic drop. I think all of those, that kind of fit perfectly. I didn't mean to do that, but wow, all of those little tidbits that you shared, Kirby, are so good, and I think, just like you said, can really be applied to any facet of life. And I think it's something that all of our listeners can take with them from starting right now. If you implement those things into your life and those attitudes and habits, then there's no doubt that you can be successful in whatever you put your mind to. And just like with what you said, it'll be a lot easier to build a village that will support you in having that success. So thank you so much. But to round us out, Kirby, I do have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. I know our listeners have gotten to know you pretty well, and I think probably got a good sense of how fun and inviting your personality is. But just to take that a notch farther, what is your favorite song to play during a grand drive?
Quick answer, Can't Stop, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
How did I know you'd say that? I mean, maybe because you played it a couple of times, but also one of my favorites. And I think it's fit the theme of this episode and a lot of the lessons you shared.
Yep, it's a good one. And there's so many songs that, like, there's certain pieces that I love to play, love to use. But what I also love to do, and you brought up Dr. Hogue earlier, so I'm going to use him as an example. He's actually one of the ones that asked me to play that song a few years ago, and every time I announce a ring that he's judging, he's either suggests it or I beat him to the chase. And like, there's certain songs I remember that certain people like, so I try, and I will tell you 99% of the time they will turn around mid-judging and look at me and be like, oh my gosh, like, how do you remember that? Those are just those like little industry tidbits that are so fun to me to have in my briefcase, if you will, to utilize during an event. So just a super fun thing and a great way to, connect with people.
What is something, I think I know the answer, but what is something you can't function without during announcing?
I want to know what you think the answer is.
I was going to say a good snack box and cough drops.
Yes. Those two are two big ones, especially during Congress, because the days can be so long. I'm sure I said this to you. This is why you're saying this, but like a good snack box. Let's like actually put good things in there. Not like those just like peanut butter crackers. Like nobody loves those. They're just like box fillers. Get the goods. But yes, those two things, and then like probably 6 or 7 different drinks.
Well, the last fun question is, what is your favorite stock show fashion trend?
Oh, good one. Honestly, I'm going to tell you what I love right now, and then I'm going to tell you one thing that I can't stand, but it's only I can't stand it on me because I think it's comical. I love the, like, I guess maybe I wish I was more trendy. I try to be trendy, but I'm not trendy. I'm old. I love the, like, throwback, like, antique clothing people are utilizing, if that makes sense. Like the thrifting, and like some of those blazers that people are, if like you looked at it just quick, be like, gosh, that's hideous, and then you put it on and like throw some pearls at it, or turquoise, or whatever your jam is, and it just looks so cool and classy. And so I love that. I don't know if it's still a trend, but I love like a frilly collar on a shirt. I think that's super fun. The trend I don't love, I love it if you're built to wear them, but I am not, so I feel like I can say this. I can't do the barrel jeans. Like, girls got hips, and it's too much. I can't do the barrel jeans. You probably can do the barrel jeans. Your girl cannot.
That's a fair point. I actually am with you. I don't like them, but because my legs are so long, no matter, like, they just don't make barrel jeans in longs. So they always cut me in like the mid calf. And I'm like, okay, this looks horrible. So I'm definitely with you.
Like I said, there's some people I've seen them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I should try them. And then no, it's just a no for me. Mm-mm.
Yes. The best fashion is the fashion that looks good on you and that you're confident in for sure, because there's plenty that myself, I can't wear sevens. I don't have the behind for it.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. I do, and I have a pair I love, and I have two pairs that I just no, can't do it. Yeah, the clothing industry is another wild industry that has certainly made a killing in the in the livestock world.
Yeah, for sure. It can get super niche. So love talking about that with you too. Well, Kirby, last thing, where can our listeners find you?
I have an Instagram, I have a Facebook, I have a Snapchat. Certainly friend me, follow me on Snap, do all those things. But I would just encourage you, if you ever see me, just come say hey. Like, let's chat. I'd love to meet more people in the industry and chat with kind of the younger generation. And like Riki said, I maybe have a pretty bad RBF, but I'm not scary, I promise. I'm not as mean as my face probably portrays I am. So yeah, find me on social media, and those. Don't expect to have a ton of content because I'm not great at it. I wish I was, but certainly if you ever cross paths with me, introduce yourself, because I'd love to meet you.
Perfect. The best way to connect is in person for sure. So awesome. Well, Kirby's story is proof that you don't have to fit the mold to make a lasting impact. Whether she's behind the microphone, raising the next generation of showmen, managing a family business, or serving her local agricultural community, she leads with authenticity, hard work, and a genuine love for the people around her. Her journey reminds us that the best leaders don't just find their voice, they use it to encourage others, celebrate agriculture, and leave every place they visit a little better than when they found it. Kirby, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom, encouragement, and perspective with all of our listeners. It's been an absolute blast having you on the podcast and just getting to catch up with you. So with that, to our followers, be sure to follow our page and join our group on Facebook, where you can get updates about the podcast, ask questions, and even share motivation with other young girls and women in the stock show industry. Until next time, sisters, this is your co-host, Riki Nardiello, and I hope you have a fabulous week.